everyone, how are you? Happy Friday. Of course, I'm recording on a Friday. You might not be listening to this on Friday, but just to let you know. Time for Copa America, the big one, the big final. As it's Argentina, Brazil, Brazil, Argentina, yet another edition of the world's biggest football rivalry at the international level. And a couple of caveats that have emerged. Of course, expecting 6,500 fans, 6,500 VIPs, I should say. Of course, all of them will be CONMEBOL special guests for this special engagement. And it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see from a pitch standpoint. It'll be interesting to see how this Argentina comes through. It's the fifth time the charm for Leo Messi, as he'll be going to his fifth final with the Argentine national team. 0 for 4 in these previous finals. Actually, if you look at Argentina, I think they're 0 for 6 in their last few finals. Of course, you have to go back to 2004 when they were ahead in the final minutes of that Copa America. And all of a sudden, Adriano ends up scoring the equalizer. I think it was the last touch of the match, or if not, it was mighty close to it. I remember that one because my dad, Argentina scores, and Chelito Delgado scores what seemed to be at that moment the game winner for Argentina. I think there was like a minute or two left in the match. My old man goes and says, Brazil's going to equalize. I'm like, oh, you crazy, man. You're crazy. I mean, you say you're crazy because, of course, with that much time, with that much momentum, who knew that was going to happen? And the way it happened as well, it was kind of crazy to kind of even ponder the fact that it could happen. Lo and behold, it did. I mean, I was flabbergasted that it possibly could have happened. I'm flabbergasted that it actually, to this day, how it happened and when it happened. And once that occurred, at that point I said, Brazil won, because Argentina looked that deflated in that final. So enough of talking about the past. We got to talk about the future. But what's very important is to see these two sides coming in. It seems like Argentina seemed to be on this crest of great form. I mean, I think it's something along the lines of like 19 matches that they have not lost. They're unbeaten in their last 19. The last time that they lost happened to be against Brazil back in 2019 in the semifinals of the Copa America. So keeping that in mind, we have a team that is quite a bit different compared to what was the team back then. A team that was still finding its way, a team that was kind of looking for a new destiny in terms of what they were looking for, what they were trying to establish in terms of a playing style, and finding new players in new positions, new players within the national team. And of course, that conveys certain insecurities and certain uncertainties for a coach that was just coming in, a coach that was being questioned 2 years ago, and a coach coming in 2 years later, still being questioned, but kind of solidifying and consolidating certain players within the national team picture. Of course, I'm talking about Argentina. Brazil seemed to be very similar, but you have to go back a few more years. I think you'd have to go back to 2016, 2017, when Dunga was sacked. Chiche comes in, and he ends up kind of changing things and helping Brazil become the juggernaut regionally that it is right now. Now, do they come in with that aura of being a juggernaut? Maybe not. Maybe this is probably one of the more vulnerable Brazil sides. Now, how they say it in Argentina, it's funny because now they're saying, oh, this is the worst Brazil side. I'm like, wait a second. This is a Brazil side that hasn't lost a match and hasn't lost an official match in 3 years. And you're telling me this is God, I'd like to see the best Brazil side if that's the case. Obviously, they're talking about individual players that aren't probably up to snuff with players from the past, like, you start talking about Cafu and Roberto Carlos and Rivaldo and Ronaldinho and Ronaldo and all those types of players. Yeah, of course, you compare it to those teams, and yeah, it does lack that star power, that awe power, if you will, of teams of the past. But collectively, they understand the respective roles, and they have players that can fulfill them to the best possible capability, to that best possible capability, and then in some cases, then some. When you look at Argentina, and I'll start there first. Of course, I'll go into Brazil in just a second. There's a lot of things to unpack in this particular preview because there's so many things to look at tactically. There's so many things to look at from storylines, from a storyline perspective, that makes this so compelling. Maybe more so compelling off the pitch than potentially on the pitch. As it could end up being a match that ends up being one of those proverbial chess confrontations with very little action, very little things occurring, or it can be an explosive final with a dramatic finish. Hopefully it's a bit of the latter. But starting out with Argentina, there's one position, maybe two, obviously two, I think you would say at this point, maybe even three, if you look at Lautaro Martinez, who seems to be the out-and-out number 9 now, completely leaving Kun Agüero on the bench. Leo Messi, of course, being the second, and I should have even started with him, because who would not start with him in terms of the Argentine national team and who's going to play? For sure he's going to play. And then Emi Martinez ends up being the third in that mix. A couple of question marks that I start looking at. Number one, and this is a two-part question. Who's going to play in the fullback positions? Mind you, I said plural because no one's really sure if it's going to be Nicolás Tagliafico and Nahuel Molina. No one's really sure if it's going to be Montiel or Acuña. It could be a mix of both. It could be Nahuel Molina and Marcos Acuña. Gonzalo Montiel could also get a start. To me, Gonzalo Montiel leaves a bit to be desired. I mean, when you start looking at some of these players from from the Argentine national team that play for the South American teams or the Argentine league teams more specifically in this case, they leave a lot to be desired. I'll be straight up with you. I'll be straight out. And to me, that ends up being a major issue. That ends up being a big question mark. I would start looking at Nahuel Molina, although he's nicked up. You start looking in the middle, and Cuti Romero also a bit nicked up. So most likely it could be Germán Petzela getting the start yet again alongside Nico Otamendi. Again, you start to see a bit of vulnerability there. In the midfield, you start looking at Lo Celso, Guido Rodriguez, and Rodrigo de Paul. Interesting three-man line in that perspective. Do you bring Angel Di Maria in? I mean, that's one of the big question marks that you hear a lot within Argentina, within Argentine media. You know, do we use Angel Di Maria to start, or do you bring him off the bench and he offers you a different dynamic? And I think that has worked a great deal for Leo Scaloni in terms of what he's been able to do with the transformation of Angel Di Maria, a player that has been questioned, that has been doubted upon quite a bit in the past few years, that is in these types of matches gets injured. I personally would use him the way you've been using him throughout this tournament. I wouldn't change anything about it, especially if you end up grinding out a match against Brazil. You end up having a bit of an advantage there. Guido Rodriguez, Leandro Paredes, Rodrigo de Paul, who do you use? That's going to be the big question mark in terms of the Argentine national team in the midfield. Now, when you look at the forwards, the only one that might be interchangeable could be Nico Gonzalez. I don't see Lautaro Martinez being taken out of the lineup. And maybe the big wild card here could be the use of Papu Gomez. How is he going to be able to function? If he is able to function, or does he match up well against a Brazil defense that is pretty solid in their overall lines? A lot of questions. A lot of questions there. That's kind of interesting when we start kind of wanting to break it down a bit more and seeing the players that are at Argentina's disposal, at Lionel Scaloni's disposal. And that's where you start to see a lot of these question marks begin to emerge. And yesterday on TC Sports in Argentina, they started talking about position by position, who's better. I disagreed with some of them. I think it was a bit more even in terms of who's playing. But at the same time, they made some valid points in other positions. And why do I say that? Well, as I mentioned before, Brazil is not the most dominant Brazil of the past few years. It seems a very comfortable Brazil. Brazil that is doesn't have much of a problem dropping back and waiting. Doesn't have a problem knowing that they have Fregi and Casemiro in front of that back line of four that can go back and defend. You have Neymar, who's been willing to defend. You have Everton. I'm talking about Everton Cebolinha, the man from Benfica, as well as Everton Ribeiro when he's been able to come on. That they've been able to drop back and defend very well. And for many, one of the, I don't know about revelation, but one of the surprises of this Brazil side in this tournament in Lucas Paquetá, who's been the player that is kind of learned to associate best with Neymar in the attacking area. So you start looking at that and it makes things quite interesting for Brazil in terms of their attack. I mean, you look, it'll most likely be Ederson in goal. You start looking at these types of options that they have at their disposal. And for the most part, Brazil, I don't think Brazil will change that much. I don't think Brazil will have a lot of complications when it comes to having a lineup. Maybe if a player improves in terms of their health, in terms of their present, in terms of what they're looking to offer in terms of attack, that is going to be something interesting to look at. And wait, you see, I'm trying to find ways to punch holes into this argument, because when you look at Renan Lodi, yeah, going forward he's quite a threat, but he's not the consistent player, and we saw a lot of that, the good and the bad of Renan Lodi when he was at Atletico Madrid this past season, and part of it the season before that. And I'm trying to think of what could be, or where could it be where Argentina have a great deal of success, and it could be down that sector. Renan Lodi has to cover Messi, or that's Messi's sector, if you will. Alexandro, we have to see how he is. He might be able to return, but that's kind of doubtful. I don't know, and I don't think that it will happen. And there is an argument that there's certain validity to what people say. Hey, these are the in terms of fullbacks, one of the poorest pairings in Brazilian football in the past 20, 30 years. Now, does it mean that they're bad? Not necessarily. It does mean that they're not up to snuff with the standard of a Cafu. I mean, you have Cafu, Dani Alves, Roberto Carlos, Marcelo, those types of players. Yeah, I mean, if we start comparing them to those, yeah, it's not even close. I mean, even if I added the emergence of Emerson to this Brazilian squad, yeah, he's still not up to snuff, although he had a sensational campaign with Betis the past season. So we look at it from that perspective. I don't think Brazil will change that much. Again, I want to be very specific, that much. Because at one point you do want to start looking at that Brazil might. One of the substitutions that was made the other day when Brazil played Peru, it was Eder Militao coming in for Renan Lodi. So you ended up playing basically with the back line with 3 central defenders and then Danilo. So you basically played a back line of 3 and ended up switching into basically a 3-5-2 or something along those lines. I mean, if you want to start flipping formations a little bit, not too much, but still Militao can handle playing out wide a little bit. But he is by trade, obviously, a central defender. where this ends up being an issue, and of course, that substitution was made later on in the match. I think if memory serves me correct, it was, I think, like 80 something, 83rd, 84th minute, thereabouts. And it was to be able to refresh a little bit in the back and be able to bring in new pieces to give a little bit more freshness defensively, to hold on and see if Neymar can get a counterattack going or something along that line of thinking from Chichi. Can Argentina do it? Yes, they can. Brazil's not coming in the greatest of form. Now, that's not saying Brazil is playing poorly. Just that Brazil has been playing so good compared to everyone else that Brazil is expected to run away with it. And when you see a team that really never kicked it into high gear, that is what ends up disappointing people, or say, hey, they didn't play it. Yeah, and I understand that. I completely understand that, to be quite honest with you. And when you start seeing that type of play and Brazil dropping back and waiting and kind of, playing rope-a-dope football, if you will, yeah, it does make things a bit more frustrating to watch. Does that mean that they're bad? No, it just means that they know how to defend. It just means that, hey, you know what? The pitch is in the best condition. The pitches have not been in the best condition. Actually, the pitches kind of sucked. Actually, hold on. I'm being nice. The pitches have been shit. Okay? Let me say it that way. Although it'll be different according to what people are saying. Yesterday was the first day in which teams, coaches, media were able to see the Maracanã. And that ends up being a very important aspect of how this match could be. The pitch, if it were played at the Engenhão, at the Nilton Santos, or anywhere else, or any of the other stadiums that have been used for this tournament, I think that this match would be a battle of attrition. If the pitch is in good condition, it's going to favor the skilled players. If the pitch is in good condition, as they're saying it is, even Chichi just, he said, hey, look, I saw the pitch. It looks phenomenal. He praised the grounds crew. He praised the people that have been organizing this match at the Maracanã, talking about how well the pitch is. So I guess he can at least give us the faith that it is. And that could change the match. Because in previous encounter, Neymar and many others have said, I'm not talking about just the skill players. I'm talking about the muckers and grinders. Those types of players have talked about how bad the pitch is, or the pitches have been throughout this tournament. Not just Brazil, but every single national team, every single media. So let's keep that in mind. Who does this mean more to? That is a very good question. And I could not answer that in a very clear way, or actually in a quick way. I can't just go say Neymar, Messi. No. Brazil, Argentina. No. Who does it mean more to? Both. First of all, if they look in front and who they're playing, that means a lot to them. Obviously, it means a lot for Brazil to beat Argentina. It means a lot for Brazil to beat Argentina in a final, and vice versa. And we could even amplify it more to say for Argentina, it means a great deal to beat Brazil in a final, to beat Brazil in a final at Maracanã. Now, whatever side you end up being on, that's where you end up kind of falling into. There is no right or wrong answer to this particular one, because it means a great deal to you. If you play your rival in a final, it means a lot. Period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So does it mean more to one? Now, who does it mean more to lose? That's the question. That there is the question. For Argentina, well, okay, fine. We lost another final. We weren't expected to win it. That's what they were going to say. We weren't the favorites. We weren't the overwhelming favorites. We weren't playing in our backyard. We weren't playing in our backyard with our fans. So if we lose, okay, well, hey, we got to a final. Man, yeah. Oh, this team looks good. This team looks great. This team might not look good. This team might not look great. Okay. But it's a stepping stone towards the ultimate goal, which is Qatar. For Brazil, if they lose, Maracanaço, Mineiraço, those types of things. And of course, I'm gonna turn around a little bit and talk about the significance, the symbolism, which ends up haunting Brazil if they do end up losing a final at home, losing at home for the first time in nearly 72 years in a Copa America, losing for the first time in an official match in over 3 years, losing for the first time at home in nearly 7. There's a lot of significance and a lot of weight that Brazil will be coming in with against Argentina. So in terms of losing, who has more to lose? It's Brazil, no doubt about it. In terms of winning, and I know I'm kind of splitting hairs here, but so people understand what it means, who it means more to, I think it's pretty even. But, and of course, when I get my gears clicking, then I start thinking, oh yeah, but this is something important too. What I forgot to mention is for Brazil, yeah, it's important to beat Argentina, everything that I recently said. What I didn't mention on the other end is for Argentina, they haven't won a title in 28 years. Yes, they've won the Olympic gold medal twice, but in Argentina, that doesn't count because it's not the senior national team. For Brazil, on the other end, the Olympic gold medal, winning it at Maracanã and having that as the only trophy that they never won, that was, of course, something that became an obsession at one point. And once they achieved it, okay, fine, we have everything. Now, if they win a Copa America, great. If they don't, there's going to be criticism, but there's still Qatar. Will it be criticized? Yeah, of course it'll be criticized. But for Argentina, it means something else. I mean, you've seen, how does this compare? If Argentina win this final, what does it compare to? Does it compare to 1986? Does it compare to 1978? Does it compare to any of the recent Copa Americas, the last one in 1993? Does it compare to beating Brazil with a one-legged Maradona and ends up breaking down half of the Brazilian defense on one leg, on a swollen ankle, passing the ball at Caniche and being able to beat Brazil at the Delle Alpi back in 1990? Where does it compare in terms of great feats? It's a feat. It's a historic. It's something that's amazing in terms of the Argentine public. If you understand where I'm heading with this. From that aspect, for them, it means a greater. So I guess you have to give, based on that little bump, a bit more to Argentina. It means a bit more. The loss means more to Brazil for obvious reasons. But keeping that in mind, Messi's first title, the possibility of him winning a Copa America at Maracanã, Jesus Christ. That sounds amazing. That sounds like something that only superhumans can be able to accomplish. Something that only Germans and Uruguayans can do. We can do that too. There's a belief that they can do this. And there's a rightful belief that it can be done. There is some sentiment to that argument, but there's certain things that they have to do or certain things that they shouldn't do in order to prevent that from happening. First and foremost, going and attacking Brazil. Let's say every single match so far, they've had, for the most part, they've been able to, or for the most part, Argentina have come out, jumped down into a lead, and then once they get that lead, they drop back and wait. They can't do that against Brazil because Brazil is patient enough to grind you down and be able to find one opportunity and be able to take advantage maybe of a refereeing mistake. And of course, I don't want to get too much into that. A refereeing mistake that can occur. I'm not saying it's ill-intentioned. Maybe it's just something that happens within the game. The referee's not positioned correctly and all of a sudden they make a call that shouldn't have been called and whatever. That can happen. It is a factor. It is a reality that can occur. So when we look at it from that perspective, they can't just drop back and wait. They have to go, and if they get the first, fine. They back and forth they go for the next few minutes. If they can get a second, even better. If they can get a third, even more. Because I know Brazil is going to try and kill them off as quickly as possible. These types of teams, you have to kill them off in order to be able to assure yourself a victory. You can't go and just say, you know what, we'll 1-0 and we'll grind them down for the next 80 minutes. It might not happen. You might not have that opportunity. Because nothing is tougher for a team collectively to do than to just shut it down offensively, defend like there's no tomorrow, If there's by any chance a goal, it's very tough to switch it back on. I don't care who you have on your team. Once you end up in that bunker mentality, it's very hard to get out of it and start attacking. And once you do, it's kind of like, oh, well, we haven't done it. How do we get back into it? The doubt starts seeping in. So the best way for Argentina to do is to be able to overcome that desire, that tendency to, here, Brazil, take the ball, see what you can do. Brazil's going to come out the same way. They're not going to wait and see and hope. Maybe the first few minutes they'll try and study each other, like, using the boxing match type, the first few rounds of a boxing match, that analogy, to try and study one another. That'll probably end up being one of the big keys for this encounter. And then after what ends up evolving there ends up evolving. But you start to see that these types of games are made for these type of players. All of them are quality players, but only two are the superstars. And these are the types of matches where those superstars are measured. And they create their legacies, or they end up tarnishing their legacies. Sadly for Messi, it might mean that he ends up tarnishing it if he doesn't play well. If Argentina lose and Messi has a good game and he ends up setting balls right and left all over the place and his teammates miss, and he misses an opportunity, or a free kick comes close and hits the post, not many people will blame him. Now, if he goes and he completely disappears for 20 minutes at a time and doesn't have many touches and starts, I hate to use the word mope, but if he looks like his body language is not the most favorable, then that's when the criticisms will come in. But if he's coming in and being what he's been the past few matches, coming in and running and getting hurt, and you see his jersey getting dirty and whatnot, you understand the visual I'm trying to establish here. That is exactly where we can see him go. And nobody will criticize him. And his legacy can forever be, hey, you know what? He tried. He made it. He did his part. He just didn't have the pieces around to make it happen. And he played teams that happen to be better collectively. Which, if you look back now with some historical reference, there is a very strong argument that the teams that he's played in finals before, collectively, I'm talking about collectively, not individually, collectively were better than what he had at his disposal. Keep always that in mind when you're hearing that, when you're listening to that, when you're trying to absorb that, because it is very important to look at it at the end of the day when all the chips are on the table and everything's been played. Now, if he has a bad game, well, all bets are off. Same thing with Neymar. I hope for as a neutral, I hope that both of them have a sensational match, because it would be such an entertaining encounter to see them go back, one goes, the other one goes, to see that back and forth that has made this rivalry so important at the world football level. I would love to see that. I would love to see both teams really go at it tomorrow. If they don't, well, of course, then you start asking questions. But for the most part, as a fan, I couldn't think of a better matchup to a tournament than these two sides, what they've meant throughout history, and what they could mean going towards the future.